Well, hello, it's Happy Times and Places, a Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which I, Toby Hadoke, ask a friend to choose an episode of Doctor Who for me to chunter through, all the while, emphasising the positive and choosing my favourite things about it, and hoping that theirs are the same too.
My name is Steve O'Brien. I'm a TV, film and music journalist, and this week I'm putting forward Boomtown for Toby to watch. Now, out of all the stories already suggested for this podcast, it wasn't really a surprise that Boomtown hadn't been picked by anyone, because I think it's something of a forgotten story. As I understand it, it was sort of written as a bit of a budget-saving episode, and it sits very much in the shadow of the two episodes either side of it, both of which are big sort of tentpole episodes. But although I think it has the appearance of being quite slight, I think it also deals with some really sort of towering moral questions. But I think what I really dig about this one is how plugged in it is to real life. Because I always used to love it in the original series when the show would interact with the real world. So when we'd see normal streets and pubs and train stations and airports, etc. I mean, we're quite used to that in the series now, but it was still fresh in 2005. So I kind of loved seeing the Doctor walk around modern-day Cardiff and eat in restaurants and wander around council buildings. I suppose it's that contrast in seeing this alien and all this whiz-banging sci-fi happening in a world that I recognise. So there you have it, Boomtown, an episode that few fans seem to love and few fans seem to hate. Because it just seems to be an episode that's just sort of there. But I hope you enjoy it, Toby. Over to you.
Tell me why I don't like Cardiff. I do like Cardiff. I just wanted a way to start this podcast. And Boomtown put into my heads the Boomtown Rats, who when I was a very young boy, but I remember it's one of the earliest number ones I remember, the Boomtown Rats. Tell me why I don't like Mondays, which was about the horror of a high school shooting. Thank goodness that pop music put a stop to those. So Boomtown, looking at it, of course, I've written it down as one word, Boomtown, but a bit like Time Lord and various other things that sort of stare me in the face often, but don't quite, some things just don't quite sit in your head no matter how many times you see them. I always have to second guess myself as to whether the Time Lord is one word or two, and I'm the same with Boomtown. And when I wrote this down for patrons to make their comments, I did it as one word, but it's not. It's Boom, then Town. So I will try and see if I can remember that. Boom, then Town, separate. It's not all in one go. This was a curious episode of Series 1, as it has come to be known, the first Russell T Davies revival season with Christopher Eccleston in his only television season in the role. And I remember it being one that sort of divided people. For some people it was fresh and new, and the idea of it being almost a play was fascinating and what modern Who should be doing, and for others it was sort of underwhelming. Is it seen as the weakest of the first season, or does the long game have that? I think this was sufficiently different, whereas the long game didn't quite hang together quite so well. Is that I think I rated this one slightly just above the long game, but I didn't dislike it, but I wasn't wild about it. It was one of those things of I quite liked it being there in the whole mosaic of Doctor Who, but it would be probably the one I return to among the least. So, one of those ones that I enjoy its existence in theory rather than in practice. But times have changed, and we will see. I haven't seen this for a long time. I think it's good. It's got plenty of things to recommend it, as everything in Series 1 does for me. But I'm fascinated to revisit it for the first time in quite some time, especially as Steve O'Brien is always a fascinating and stimulating correspondent. But I have lots of fascinating and stimulating correspondence because I have opened this up to the denizens of Patreonville. That's at patreon.com/Toby Hadoke, where you can add your thoughts about upcoming episodes and be featured on the podcast. We're generally quite positive because that's the whole point of the podcast. But let's see whether Boomtown goes boom, or whether it goes boom like Ace says it in a battlefield. So, Andrew F. says, genuinely was surprised by this one at the time and the direction it took. The scenes between Margaret and the Doctor at the dinner table were the highlights. His hypocrisy was one of the best things about the season. That's interesting. Yes, it's... Yeah, but I don't think it's sort of having the Doctor's hypocrisy there to sort of point the finger at him in a way, as just to open up an interesting discussion about how we apply morality, which... but yes, it is certainly... not the episode you think you're going to get when the episode starts. Philip Marsh says, Boomtown is probably the Doctor Who episode that makes me laugh the most, admittedly along with Love and Monsters. So the inference there being that Love and Monsters is liked by weirdos and outcasts. Well, that's you and me both, Philip. There are so many great moments. She's climbing out of the window, isn't she, being a favourite? And the restaurant scene is beautifully written and performed. It's one of the finest examples of the way RTD scripts flick between comedy and drama in an instant, the one supporting the other. Eccleston is on fire in this episode. It's less showy than his performance in Dalek, but has more layers. OK, there's some very convenient plotting, but I don't care. This episode is utterly unique and one of my favourite New Who stories. Philip comes back for more, in fact, twice. Oh, and I do my best to avoid spoilers, but I had heard there was going to be a regular character called Captain Jack, but I knew nothing else about him. I was decidedly worried when he turned up in The Empty Child, as he was incredibly irritating, and I worried he was going to drag the last few episodes down a notch. So it was a relief to find that in Boomtown, that he had suddenly become a rounded human being and an enjoyable part of the team. But that's RTD's gift for characterisation for you. And Philip, for the third coming of Philip Marsh, he says, also, a word for the subplot about Rose and Mickey's relationship. It's a brave decision to let the audience see our viewpoint character in a casually cruel light, showing us the effect her thoughtlessness has on Mickey, and also sowing the seeds of his eventual empowerment to leave her behind. A few years later, Amy and Rory would have a similar relationship, but in that instant, Amy's much more obvious cruelty would be celebrated by the show, with her being rewarded for her behaviour, by Rory having to guard her for 1,000 years to prove himself worthy, as though this were romantic rather than the result of negging and emotional mistreatment. Rose is a good person, but she's careless with Mickey's affections, and RTD doesn't let her off the hook for it here. That's an interesting comment there about Amy and Rory as well. Aaron Gullius comes in with, I really wanted the Dr. Rose-Jack combo to be in more episodes. They're great in Boomtown and have some fine chemistry. Eccleston is so good in this episode. Melvin Pena, as dismissive and cavalier as fandom has been over the past 20 years about the farting aliens and belching litter bins, I don't think we've truly yet reckoned with the reality that the Slitheen occupy almost a third of the Eccleston Doctor's era, nor that Margaret Slitheen is his greatest original nemesis. How much better would Aliens of London World War III have been if RTD had known in advance what he had in Annette Badland and given her character more prominence in that two-parter? All that said, Boomtown is an extraordinary episode, and the dinner conversation between the Doctor and Margaret cuts to the core of the Doctor's character, his doubts, his strengths, and his purpose, and Margaret challenges the Doctor in a way that few other villains, new or classic, ever do. The Doctor is a hypocrite, the way normal folks account for things, but that doesn't make him less of a hero. In fact, it makes his heroism shine even brighter. He has to be able to shoulder the contradictions in order to make impossible decisions that affect, change and end lives. The only reason Margaret's remarks affect him is because he strives to be and to do better. Eccleston is one of the few Doctor performers who can take you on and through that internal struggle. That's very interesting. I'm gonna be looking out for things like this, Melvin. You're the second person to mention the Doctor's hypocrisy. Or is it that just life is full of difficult choices and difficult choices have contradictions? And in this increasingly binary world in which we live, where you have to toe a particular line with utter consistency, otherwise be cast out of a social group or of a Twitter argument or whatever, I think anything that examines that it's not as simple as that. And we all make moral compromises every single day, but that doesn't make redundant or re-emphasise and re-emphasise in terms of put a different emphasis on things that we say and do in other circumstances. Life is, it's what is it that Mark Warren says in Love and Monsters? It's so much, life is so much darker and more complicated and all those sort of things, and as a result so much better because we have texture. We have not everything can be cut and dried because life is not a series of exact calculations, if you like, and it makes things frustrating and it makes people contradictory, but that's the stuff of life, really, and life is not easy, and life is not easy to compartmentalise. Haven't even got to the episode yet. Sarah Krotzer, hello Sarah. This was the surprise hit of season 1 for me, and might still be my favourite modern-day RTD script. Praise indeed. The cast is firing on all cylinders, especially Eccleston. I was just a couple of years older than Rose is meant to be, and I remember my mother coming in and being shocked when Mickey suggests they get a hotel room for the night. Simpler times. Simpler times indeed, Sarah. James Curray Smith says, hi Jim, is it wrong to say that pretty much every thought I've ever had about Boomtown, which I adore, is in this post, and you're welcome to any of it if you feel like filleting? Oh, that's taken me by surprise. So James has on buttondown.com/Curray_Smith/archive/boom-town written a whole post about Boomtown, which I'm not going to read now, Jim, because I'm going to go on with the motley and to Mr. M.L. Dunstan. The low-budget story of the season, says he. What a good, gripping story it was. It looked fantastic on screen. But as a caveat to what I said about Jim, what I might do, Jim, is go back to that and maybe put it in the post-credits or something, because I don't want to ignore your contribution because you're brilliant. But I'm in this zone right now, and I want to get to the episode. The chemistry, continues M.L. Dunstan, between the Doctor and the Slitheen was on point. Annette Badboy, I don't know if that's predictive text for Annette Badland or whether Mr. M.L. Dunstan is having fun. I think it's probably predictive text doing its thing. Annette Badboy was great, and she was cunning right to the end. I thought she might have farted at the dinner table. Eccleston was a great Doctor. Shame he only done one season, but thanks to him, Doctor Who continues 20 years later. Indeed. David Gillespie Pratt, the one that took me by surprise in 2005. The return of the Slitheen did not fill me with confidence, nor did Annette Badland's fairly broad performance earlier in the season. But this is a low-key, well-written and performed tale. The dinner scenes are some of Eccleston's best, and Badland is superb throughout. I'll forgive it for the use of some really naff sound effects early on. Steve White says, this is a funny old story. This was the first week where I'd actually forgotten Doctor Who was actually on, which is weird when I think about it, because the immediate story before this blew me away and still remains my favourite New Who story to date. That's The Empty Child the Doctor Dances, of course. It was only when I was cutting the lawn around midday that I realised Boomtown was on that evening. I think I went into this one thinking it was the obvious series filler, cheaper episode. However, there's a lot to love about it once the comedy chase scene gets out of the way. The restaurant scene was fantastic, to coin a phrase. Annette Badland's mumsy demeanour juxtaposing the villainy she has oozing from her appropriated human form. The dialogue with Eccleston, only a killer would know that, in that scene is so tense you can see it gets under the skin of the Doctor. Very underrated story. Jason Thompson says, at the time I thought this was a weak episode with a Deus Ex Machina ending. Now I can see that in many ways it still is. The dinner scene is the fulcrum, of course, but the trouble is it can't actually come to any resolution anyway. I think I might hold it in higher regard now if we hadn't subsequently been bombarded by so many later episodes that also tried to examine the good man notion of the Doctor's character. I think pretty well every incarnation has had that internal crisis, and it's getting dull and repetitive now. That said, the performances are all great. Annette Badland is a wonderful foil for Eccleston's Doctor. It works, but it's not one I revisit often. It's not one I revisit often, Jason, but the talk here has got me intrigued. And I, having just come from Colony in Space, which has a lot of talk and character which I've been able to mine for gold, I feel perhaps I'm in a good frame of mind to do this, whereas surrounded, sandwiched between Empty Child, Doctor Dances and Bad Wolf Parting of the Ways, I think it was always going to feel like, something somewhat more trivial or experimental or low-key. And yes, you can get interesting meat and drama and subtle nuance out of a conversation at a dinner table, but when you've got gas-masked children in World War II on one side and exploding Daleks flying through space on the other, it's going to be a hard task to be the go-to instalment from this period. But of course, the beauty of Doctor Who is that depends what mood you're in, and one afternoon I might well be in the mood for a dinner and bondage. Ha ha ha. Fraser Gregory says, a beautiful little gem of a story. And Fraser Gregory is always in the mood, not for dinner and bondage. I don't know if he may well be, but he's always in the mood for a story that everybody hates. Ha ha ha. He is, if you don't know Fraser, he's an excellent podcaster, a lovely gentle spirit, and a very articulate defender of the sort of Doctor Who he likes, which is often the Doctor Who that everyone hates, because he is I don't know if he's self-styled or whether this moniker has been bestowed upon him, but it's an apt one. He is the champion of the damned. So he is championing here, is he, Boomtown? He says it's totally overlooked due to the giants that straddle it. It's a story born of necessity, like the best ones tend to be, in which RTD realises he doesn't have quite enough plot for 45 minutes, and so pauses halfway through to give us a morality play instead. Never before has the bonnet of the Doctor's morals been lifted and exposed for us to examine, like a TARDIS console spilling the vortex, ha-ha, and never has it been done so effectively since. But we also get laughs from Margaret's escape, pathos from Vicky's realisation that Rose will always love the Doctor more than him, and, with the introduction of the space surfboard and the words bad wolf cropping up, a dogleg to the finale that we don't even realise is a dogleg. It's the perfect preamble to the finale, one that sets the tone for years to come. Lee Wood says, Annette Badland is one of the all-time great guest cast, a great character deftly performed. The restaurant scene is one I remember as being profound at the time, a real moment of grown-up drama. It stands up still. I'm interested to see how it stands up, and maybe it has aged well as well, which not all of it seemed so mad at the time. It's like I say this about Buffy as well. Nothing seemed more modern and hip and speaking to me, and the idea that it might date seemed impossible. But of course, I'm listening to a good X-Files podcast at the moment as well, and of course they're talking about how that's dated, and at the time that seemed as modern as you could ever be. Paul Goodridge says, hi Paul, this was transmitted during a pretty rough week for me. It was indeed, Paul, and you've shared that with me privately, and I'm reaching to you across cyberspace and giving you a squeeze. So I've always struggled to disassociate it from what was going on personally at the time. My son really likes it, and I do like the restaurant scene and a few of the jokes, but overall it just doesn't work for me. I just don't feel it makes its point about capital punishment that it seems to want to, as it has a bit of a cop-out at the end. The Slitheen isn't killed, but does have her memory wiped and is returned to infancy. Isn't that much the same thing? The person she was is effectively dead. When Donna has her mind wiped, we're meant to see that as a tragedy, but not here. On the other hand, I do really like the development of Rose and Mickey's relationship, as they're shown to have a sort of outgrown each other, not just she's outgrown him. And it's good to see Cardiff as Cardiff for the first time, though plans to build a nuclear power station in the middle of a populated area getting approved does stretch credibility. Thanks, Paul. Adam Parkin says, on my initial watch, I accepted the idea of the heart of the TARDIS resetting someone to childhood, which fitted with the story by giving Margaret a second chance. I was annoyed when the same didn't happen to Rose a couple of episodes later, as it felt inconsistent. Oh, yeah, well, I'm sure we'll get into that, Adam. Tom Selinsky says, as a story viewed out of context, I think this feels a bit light, but it is nevertheless engrossing, thanks in no small part to the amazing pairing of Annette Badland and Christopher Eccleston. But in the context of that landmark first season, it works even better. I think it tells new viewers we won't just be blowing up a different London landmark each week. Sometimes we'll be taking time out for a more thoughtful, more character-based episode, because this show can be anything and go anywhere. God, Russell got much right first time. Russell got so much right first time. Hats off. And Brandon Moore says, hopefully I'm not too late. You're not, Brandon, but want to share my comment anyway. I've always loved Boomtown, Boomtown, not Boomtown, Boomtown. I feel that the earlier Slitheen two-parter is greatly undervalued by most of Who fandom. A cracking first contact story that makes great use of the longer running time to cover more aspects of a story than most new Who episodes allow, but is let down by a less than flawless presentation of the Slitheen. Most of the mistakes with the rubber-suited farty ones seem to have been overcome by this episode. The story is definitely a character piece, but this is not something new to Doctor Who. In fact, I think this is pretty much this story that feels very 60s Who in its pace and reliance on the central cast. And isn't it funny how quickly Captain Jack feels like a regular? The Deus Ex Machina ending of the TARDIS hard-boiling Margaret has come in for some criticism from some quarters, but when I first saw this episode as an 8-year-old, how am I like to speak to you, Brandon, if you were 8? My good Lord. I was a grown-up. I got kids. I thought it was great. It's the first real hint we get in the new series of the TARDIS being alive. So that added element makes the convenience of its delivery more comfortable. I hadn't thought of it like that, Brandon, because I do have an issue with the ending, and let's see how I feel about it this time around. So those are the comments from Patreon. Please do come and join us if you fancy it. But let's roll out the carpet for the VIP entrance into the Boomtown, and we're going to make that entrance courtesy of BBC iPlayer in 3, 2, 1. Oh, so we got a previously on. I never tire of that shot of Big Ben. Oh God, I remember when I first saw it. So yes, because this was obviously not part of the plans of the show when it came back. Just goes to show how any TV series evolves as it is made, because I think it was this scene where Annette Badland is so good. She does that grin, doesn't she, and looks terrifyingly at him, that I think they realised they'd underused a brilliant actress. I think she was doing Cutting It at the same time as well, though, so I think she had to go between this job doing Boomtown and that, and had to fit loads of things in. It's always like that as an actor. You got 6 months of naff all, and then you have 3 jobs at the same time. In fact, I had that with something recently where I had to be driven from a curtain call to do some filming and back again in time for my show the next night. The following week, I was massively unemployed. Anyway, here is a landmark. That's a brilliant opening shot of the camera creeping slowly towards the door with William Thomas there in the middle, making history as the first credited actor from classic Doctor Who to appear in the new series. It was bound to happen. I remember it was something that I got quite excited about, and who could it possibly have been? And of course it was one of the Welsh ones. It was because he's Welsh, and he's Welsh in Remembrance of the Daleks episode 2, in which he plays a very odd character, and he's not a classic series character you come away thinking a lot about. And then here he is, and it's a tiny part from here, which, considering his pedigree, he's one of Wales's leading character actors, but he's had big roles. He's got a big role in Twin Town, the film, for example. He's, I would say if I was an actor of William Thomas's stature and somebody said, you're up for a part tomorrow, it's one scene, you get killed at the end of it, I'd have been like, really? Shouldn't we be waiting for something better for me? But he took it, and of course he comes back to the Doctor Who universe as Gwen's father in Torchwood, which is a big and recurring role. So I think it just goes to show, don't turn anything down, because it's a dilemma, because you might think, oh, well, do they only see me as small parts? And I know, I've had this discussion with my agent when I've been up for something, and she's been like, I think we should hold out and say no, because they should be seeing you for something bigger than this. And you go, all right then, and then those people don't see you for anything at all. So it's such a tricky one, and that's not being snooty. I've played small parts in lots of things. It's just how you play it sometimes, and the optics, and because if you do show you're happy to do everything, it can backfire. Anyway, let's not get into the psychology of an actor. I thought that opening was superbly directed. The director of this, Joe Ahern, of course, directs the season finale and then directed Dalek and done a very damn fine job. Never returns to Doctor Who after this season. Wrote something very supportive of Christopher Eccleston in the papers when Eccleston left. Was not supposed to be directing this. From my understanding, I've spoken to people who work on this show. Christopher Eccleston slightly took against the director of this, and he was moved on, and Joe Ahern, who Christopher Eccleston got on with very well, was moved in. Not the first time I understand that has happened with Eccleston on TV programs either, where him and a director have not quite worked out. So make of that what you will. This is a sort of Scooby Gang, isn't it, for this period of the show? I haven't seen this for ages. I do like Rose's pigtails. There's intelligent cutting here from the different characters. I like the cutting back to the Doctor, sort of noting what's happening. Captain Jack is already part of the furniture. And I remember when I first heard about Captain Jack, I wasn't that interested in him. They announced him very, very early. Do you remember? He was sort of, he was somebody that we were told about pretty early on in the show's sort of publicity drives. I like the Doctor's. He's quite Davros, isn't he, with his head torch. So here's a nice explanation for why we're always going to be going back to Cardiff, which I think is reasonable. If you're filming in Cardiff, go to Cardiff. Make a virtue of Cardiff. Doctor Who has been rather London-centric. Now, modern shows have an issue here, don't they? Where they were quite cheesy, and we're a gang in a TV show taken off into time and space, and then Mickey draws attention to that. So the show can have its cake and eat it. It can go, we'll enjoy the fact that, we do this and we have fun, but also give a character to raise an eyebrow at it and go, are you a bit self-satisfied, and are you being a bit TV show conscious of yourselves? And I'm happy with that. I'm happy with that because it gives you the best of both worlds. Captain Jack felt to me very modern when he joined, and that W sign that he did there seemed like a thing that sort of modern cool people from the real world did, and that nerky nukes like me didn't do. So therefore I felt it was the sort of stuff that helped package it to an audience of real normal people. This is beautifully shot. I don't think I'd noticed. I don't think that was the headline that I came out with when I have watched this back in the past. But watching it now, Joe Ahern's framing of even the most innocuous seeming stuff is actually extremely televisual. Very good. I do love Annette Badland. She's an absolutely terrific actress. I've had the pleasure of meeting her a few times at conventions and stuff. In fact, she's a Facebook friend of mine. She asked me to be a Facebook friend, and she said, we seem to know a lot of the same people, so why not? And I was like, oh, all right then. She's a terrific actress, and oh my God, she doesn't stop. She's in everything. And I think, it's nice that producers will see an actor do damn good work, a couple of months prior to this, and go, let's contrive a way to get this person back and give them a bit more and make better use of them. It's the sort of thing that makes actors live in hope. And here's Mally Harris, who's Welsh actress. I was talking to Shez about this the other day. This first year used a lot of local Welsh actors. Well, I don't know where they live, but I'm assuming. But a lot of Welsh actors, including Father's Day, is full of Welsh actors playing Cockney characters. And when Doctor Who gets really popular and successful, it's like they stop relying on the local talent, and because everyone will do it and everyone will be in it and everyone will travel for it. And I think that's a shame. I think there should be sort of Welsh on-screen talent throughout a programme that is made in Wales. Ditto Manchester-based talent on programmes that are made in Manchester. This is This is funny, and it sort of stretches. You know that it's a bit. He was decapitated. It was an icy patch, and all of that is very, very funny. But this story does not start in the way that you. Well, no, it does not. It does not carry on in the way that this start gives you. You kind of think you know where you are. This is why I think this is very clever. Is she's got curious journalist gets killed written all over her, and obviously they've clearly learnt. Russell would have none of this, because I've said this before when I interviewed him and said, what would you change about stuff, and he was like, nothing at all. But I do feel they've slightly reined in the Slitheen, and they've certainly learnt how to film them better. You can really see the zip on the head there. That's maybe I'm watching. Maybe it's because I'm closer, but it's looking good. It's a very neat effect. I mean, this effect of the Slitheen head emerging is, it's one that you have to kind of live with slightly. But this is not Yeti on your loo in Tooting Bec, Slitheen in your cubicle in Cardiff. It's the 21st century version, baby. And I think there's something brilliant about the way she hangs her skin suit up, as you would, like a coat. But actually, the Slitheen here, you see the practical Slitheen. They don't do that mix of practical and CG. Although, of course, the eye blinking is CG. And this is the stuff that Russell is so good at. Just dropping in his name. I don't get many Jeffreys in Doctor Who. Nothing exciting, but he's mine. That's a very Russell T Davies sort of line about, the comfort and celebration of the everyday, and that is what most of us do most of the time, And actually, as an adult, the lure of the stuff that's yours. I'm sitting in a room that I've painted myself and put the shelves, got these shelves up and put my things in the order that I like them, and they're not very exciting, but they're mine, and I think there's something to be said for that. And I think this idea of an alien with a family, the glycerin and the sweat on this Slitheen really makes it work better. I think this the way that Joe Hearn films Margaret Slitheen is extremely good. You're really getting the character. The performance is good, of course, but and I think this is a very unexpected thing. You're expected her to kill, so this is telling you, well, this is very modern Doctor Who. And I know a lot of sort of fans of old school who might object to this. Nobody, a lot of people don't want a sad monster. They just want a monster that marauds and kills, and humanity wins through in the end. I welcome the nuance. I'm aware that Who can sometimes also go into the mawkish a little bit, and I think today sometimes just in the everyday we find sympathy in the monstrous, and are too hard on ourselves. This is clever because I'm kind of with Mickey a bit on this, in that Mickey feels a little bit out of it, although actually he's joined in there. That surprised me. I actually thought I'd forgotten. I thought when he did that line they would all go, oh, yeah mate, you weren't there, because there can be a cruelty to the TARDIS gang sometimes, which I think is usually deliberate. I think I love this though. I love anything that's got a kind of hero shot to it. It feels, this is the sort of thing that modern Who and modern television does rather well, and I like it. I like things that are televisual, either in terms of the visual or the music, the framing, the hero shottedness of it. And Jack has fitted in absolutely immediately. and I like the way that the Doctor slightly uncuts it. What's he say? Like he said. And Eccleston is very comfortable here. I'm not always sure he's hugely comfortable with the comedy, but I do actually sometimes think that was nicely done as well in the way that Mickey goes off. But I actually think Eccleston's awkwardness kind of fits. Not necessarily always deliberately. I like this guy. He's called Aled Pedrick, and he got lots of. He gets a Doctor Who. Not many people get a Doctor Who. We'll add him to the list of people who say Doctor Who. And I remember he was given a bit of a. They did it in those days. They would announce the cast of who was going to be in an episode, and that he'd won Young Welsh Actor or something. He'd won something, and so you'd been maybe led to think he was going to play rather a big part, and it's not a huge part. He makes a good impression though. It's very good. She's climbing out the window, isn't she? I think that's really funny, and he's really light about the way he does it. And he's not done massive amount of telly since he's a teacher at the Guild. He teaches singing at the Guildhall. That's what he'd won. I think he'd won a musical theatre or a singing thing. Anyway, he's great. Leave the mayor alone. I think he's great, so he does a nice job. But in those days, they did make a point of getting us excited about who was in it and do a line about them. I mean, in modern days, I think when Ian McElhenney and Anthony Carf were going to be in it, it wasn't even mentioned in Doctor Who magazine, or barely, And I think that sort of attention to detail about they gave us morsels about everything, so that each episode had various headlines about it. And I know this is daft, but it sort of knows it is. The ladder, so well shot. God, he knows how to create a picture. But again, this is not where I thought the episode was going. I thought, okay, she's escaped. So we've had that she's going to kill the journalist, and she doesn't. And then we've had she's made her cunning escape. You didn't expect this, and I remember thinking, I don't know where this story is going. This is not. I thought that she would disappear. She'd have a plan. She'd start to unleash it. People would die. Blah 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 blah. This is not where I expected this story to go, because it looked like it was going to be a story about a deadly nuclear power station. And actually, we're sort of, 16 minutes in, and the plot is kind of over, really. And what they're also using very cleverly here, in between the big World War II episode and the big season finale, is that they're going, we've got this gang of actors. Let's use them. And Russell T Davies is very, very good at creating characters that you care about and putting them in situations that test them, and he doesn't ever let them off the hook. And again, I think this is a lot more. I dread to think how this would, if an episode like this was aired today, because I remember when this went out, people weren't sort of wild about it, but more for the reasons that it wasn't your traditionally exciting episode of Doctor Who. And a lot of people did like it because it was going to a place that Doctor Who didn't normally go. But in terms of it being, an exciting Doctor Who episode, I know there was disappointment. It wasn't your sort of classic Who kind of story. But now I think that the characters are allowed to show their inherent flaws and their inherent complexities, and that not everybody's right about everything. Modern commentators, I notice, particularly on social media, sort of seem to think that the writer is telling us we should be cross with this character because they're bad. Whereas I think good writing rather ruefully observes that all of us have flaws and contradictions. And a good writer isn't judging that. A good writer is saying, that's what we are, and that's what we have. And the compromises that we have to make are sometimes bought at the expense of our own morality or our own self-esteem or our own worldview. And I think that is really interesting. That to me is much more interesting than going, oh, that means that they're that they're a baddie, or that means that they're a bigot, or that means they're a this or they're a that. That's not what this kind of writing is aiming for. This kind of, well, we'll get to it because we'll have those conversations. But this I think is quite funny, is that, yes, it's called Bad Wolf, and that's the lovely, we have the Chancellor Flavia music, and we have Bad Wolf, which people had definitely started to see. The Moxa Balhoun had said, this is a Bad Wolf situation. And I'd noticed people online, and I think had people in Doctor Who magazine, but certainly I was aware that Bad Wolf was a thing without necessarily having noticed it at first myself. But at this point, I was looking for it. So when that came out, I knew what it meant. He's so good at those looks, Eccleston. But we have to acknowledge that, okay, we have the reveal where Blythe Droog is Welsh for Bad Wolf, but that means to everyone in Wales, they've called this nuclear power station the Big Bad Wolf, which you wouldn't do, would you? You go, yes, and I'm building a new bridge. It's called the Slavering Gangrenous Vampire, but it's all right because it's in Cornish. No one will notice till somebody comes along and translates it for the viewers in England. But again, I think Doctor Who, to an extent, yes, it has to be believable, but I think Doctor Who has the ability sometimes, it has a cheeky power where it can go, look, I know that it was very handy that ladder was there. We know it too, but we're going to have sort of fun with it. And although the bigger themes of these stories and these characters that we're depicting are absolutely important and dramatic, sometimes our presentation can get away with being a bit arch and being a bit daft. Go with us because it's worth it. So I think this era is very good at that. I think Russell T Davies is very good at having a sense of humor that is like, oh, don't sweat that sort of stuff because it's fun. And I think Doctor Who has to have that sense of fun. But here you see that the episode is going somewhere very interesting, and a long night ahead indeed, because this is now what the episode becomes. And Eccleston's so good at this intense stare stuff, and and the audience is now being asked a question in a programme where the hero is somebody who doesn't use weapons, who spent a lot of his third incarnation saying, well, I don't like the military, but then getting them to blow things up. Doctor Who has killed people, but I think in most of our mind's eye, the Doctor is a non-life-taking pacifist. I know some would disagree with that, and rightly so, because we have the ocular proof in broadcast episodes. But I certainly think that for my worldview, we reject the things that do not fit in, don't we? And I kind of turn a blind eye to the Doctor zapping the ogre on here, or blowing up the Nymon complex there, or melting the odd ice warrior there, because I think the tenor of the show is that the Doctor, and again you can scratch further that and say, well, does he consider some life more important than others? No, I think it's just that the television programme has sometimes gone, well, we need to melt the monsters and the Doctor's going to do it. But the tenor of the programme is that the Doctor, tries to preserve life where he can, but that we as viewers have latched onto that hero. I don't think many viewers see the Doctor as a kind of Dirty Harry type. Certainly, obviously, there's a lot of ground between Doctor Who and Dirty Harry, but we do accept that in this programme about a largely pacifistic oriented character, and certainly one that prefers intellect and reason to violence. The Doctor's not a gun-toting character. When he does indulge in fisticuffs, it's rather camp kung fu that renders people unconscious or frozen. Is that at the end of the programme, largely the villain gets killed, sometimes as a result of the Doctor's actions, but often the show contrives to make the villain, Harrison Chase tries to pull the Doctor in when the Doctor's trying to pull him out, for example. And that's in a story where the Doctor's really, really violent. Often the villains are killed by their own stupidity, determination. And the Doctor will say, "Oh, well, I gave you a chance," because the Doctor at least needs to feel that he's given them a chance. But it's, I am somebody that is against the death penalty and always has been. I think it's this is beautifully lit, and the whole thing's been beautifully played. Joe Ahern, I mean, we know he can do the action, but my God, the way that he's filming his actors, it's a bit like Camfield, really. He's always given us the headline news of the action sequences and the fact that he handles the big blistering stuff. But he's good with the actors, and he's good with the picture composition, and the lighting here is really, really good. And using the TARDIS set, this is Doctor Who using its basic resources very well. But this is good because you kind of know she's probably up to something. The Doctor's not being daft, but you also know that the Doctor's assured enough to go, well, all right, I'll do this too. This isn't the Doctor having the wool pulled over his eyes. And actually, I quite like how blatant it is then as well. It would be a bit annoying if the Doctor went into this with his eyes closed and, she managed to render him unconscious or something. And you kind of think this is where the episode is going, because you think they're not really going to sit and have a conversation about capital punishment. And they do. Now, I say I'm against capital punishment, but I've, seen recently some monstrous things be done, and one by somebody who'd been released from prison, and you sort of think, and there is a part of me that goes, well, would the world really be any worse off without that person? Now, for me, and it's easy for me to say because I don't have to take the consequences of their dinner and bondage. I always sometimes, not wild about when Doctor Who goes anywhere near anything sexual, but I quite like dinner and bondage. I think that's quite fun. But it is a slippery slope, and if I was to lose that line and not to have some of the sexiness that Doctor Who has had in it in the past 20 years, I think I would be a happier bunny. I don't think Doctor Who needs sex references beyond the sauciest it need get is Count Grendel's "because I once showed her a certain courtesy." That's as far as we need, but I'm aware that that's me and I'm a fuddy-duddy. But yes, the capital punishment thing, I can easily theorise because I'm not the person that will have the moral responsibility for what happens to anybody. But I think the thing about moral positions is it means you sometimes have to do things that make you uncomfortable. And for me, the taking of life is wrong, whoever does it. And we have all sorts of people nowadays saying, oh, I don't believe in killing people. Oh, but you can kill them because they're bad. Well, everyone who kills anybody thinks that the person that they're killing deserves it, or at least they have an excuse to do it. So I don't think that's a moral position. And I think moral positions sometimes when you have to go, even if I would like or I would be unmoved by the death of that child killing mass murderer or whatever, one to adopt the moral position, one must be better than the bad person. But I also think that can be a sign of moral cowardice, because sometimes to adopt the moral position, you have to do the difficult thing. And if that means removing somebody who might do bad things again, and then even the practical thing, to expect the poorest people in society to contribute to the exchequer that then keeps that mass murderer alive because it hasn't got the balls to take that person's life, which would be more practical and cheaper. But then you go, but if we're now laying human life against economics, but it's not just any human, it's a monstrous human. So I'm aware, I don't think it's as cut and dried as all of that. And I think that's the sort of stuff that drama should, and I can sit in both places at the same time, and I'm not appalled by either position. I can see the logic of both positions and a lot of the sub positions therein, which is why I like drama that explores that. I'm not sure I was ready for Doctor Who to do it. I didn't mind this when it went out. I just wasn't blown away by it because, there were obvious headline grabbers. But in the vast mosaic of Doctor Who, I thought. I think it's nice to have this, and actually watching it now, I think it's a really rich experience. It looks amazing. Not that Rob Delaney, Rob Delaney from Catastrophe. See, she's a bit big. She lost weight. People would now say, "Oh God, RTD is fat shaming." No, he's not. He's actually just writing what people of, not the current generation of people that age who probably speak less like that because they're conscious of such things. But that's not a writer fat shaming. That is a writer writing how those people talk to each other. He's not taking a moral stance on it. He's showing even our heroic characters in all the likeable and dislikable shades that every human being has. And if you're watching a drama because you want all of your heroes to enunciate pure thought and pure speak that aligns with the way that you think and speak, and confirms your worldview at every turn. One, you're not going to get very interesting drama, and two, who do you think you are? In fact, maybe look at the fact that these heroic characters have flaws and make moral compromises, and look at your life and where you might have flaws and you might make moral compromises, because actually the worst thing in this world is people with moral certainty. They're the ones who do bad things, and that is a rich theme running throughout all of Doctor Who, because the ones with the most moral certainty are a bunch of chaps called the Daleks, and they're the bad guys. And this seems to me even more relevant today, to be so keen to show your characters warts and all and not judge them, because I think at the moment we live in very judgmental times, and I certainly feel it. And from what I read on the sort of Twitter sphere and stuff about the way that people digest Doctor Who with a determination to either call out the characters or the writers rather than to accept the fiction on the terms that it is being presented, and sit in the nuance and contradiction that creates the drama, the friction that creates the drama, the moral grey areas that create the drama, the character differences and contradictions, and the fact that we've with Mickey, who I found really annoying actually up to this point, and I think Noel Clarke's excellent in this scene, and I think he was maybe slightly sold short by. I think he's clearly playing for a different style of show in Aliens of London World War III, and I think he said in interviews at the time he kind of realised that that's not what they were doing, and reined it in and changed it. But also, he was painted slightly broader as well, and I think. And I think when he gets much more to do, and again, you as an audience member, I felt a bit bad for having written off the character and indeed the actor. And I'd gone from thinking, God, I hope he gets killed or doesn't come back, to actually being quite pleased when Mickey turns up again. It's odd, I still don't think he's the best actor in the world, but I think I'm taking anything that's happened subsequently with his personal, professional life out of the equation. I'm reviewing this as a piece of television, and some people, fine if they cannot disassociate the art from the artist, as it were, though I know both of those are lofty terms in this situation. I'm going to, and I can, because otherwise I'm just going to spend all my time going, oh, and since this was made, this person's done this bad thing. I don't want to live my life doing that. I don't understand the desire to live your life doing that, to use... I love this stuff because it's an escape from the world. It's sometimes a mirror to the world. It's sometimes a catharsis from the sort of mind-bothering of one's inner monologue or what's going on in one's life. It's an escape. It's a world that's safe to postulate in, to wrestle with moral arguments that I'll never have the consequences for in. I don't need to let the real world bleed into it in that sense. Although, at the same time, I'm, of course, really interested in the actors and the stories and all, and the making of and all of that. But I'm not interested in finding out reasons why I shouldn't like them. Although inevitably. Well, no, because I'm not going to go down that path. I think for reasons I've explained, it's pretty obvious I'm not going to condone anything, but anything that's come out about certain actors from Doctor Who in this period. But I'm also not going to make a lofty statement condemning it, because who am I? Who cares? But it doesn't matter what, and it should be pretty obvious what my opinion of that is. But that's not actually important to the virtues or otherwise of Boomtown. And I've spoken through this brilliant scene. I think all that comic stuff is very fair. I wasn't wild about it at the time, but I rather like it now, because again, it's deliberately saying this is a bit daft, and yet you've got that real emotion there from Mickey, and within that as well, you've had the brilliant scene of letting one go, which the Doctor rightly points out it's a luxury belief of the mass murderer, who go, oh yeah, well, I am good, I let that one person go. And I think calling Blonde to account on that is a very mature and intelligent piece of writing, and there's some real psychological insight there that's very grown up for Doctor Who. And so an episode that appeared like it was going to be it appeared like it was going to be a story about a big nuclear explosion, and then it looked like it was going to be a sort of funny Scooby-Doo caper, and then it becomes this interesting treatise on the death penalty and the contradictions at the heart of the character of Doctor Who. The moral crusader who, nonetheless, if he doesn't kill, he certainly allows people to be put in a position where they will get killed, and he doesn't have to do it himself. So then you go, well, who is the more moral character? Is it him, or is it Dirty Harry, who's at least got the honesty to go, I'm the instrument of justice, and I will wipe people out with my Magnum 45? Is that not more morally courageous, actually? And again, I don't see Russell going, and we as an audience are supposed to be going, yeah, Doctor Who, you bloody hypocrite. We're supposed to go, oh my God, this stuff is hard, and thank goodness that the Doctor is there to negotiate it on our behalf. And we trust the Doctor to generally make the right decision and to suffer for it, if you like. And all of that affects stuff. I think all that stuff of Rose running through Cardiff and the cracks in the floor, that's all superb. The lighting in this episode is excellent. And it was all a ruse, but not the, oh, I'm going to poison you at dinner. That was all sort of banter. That was sci-fi villain and hero facing off against each other, sort of banter that you can sort of get away with in these shows. But it was a slight distraction from the bigger picture, which takes us back to the opening story that we thought that this story was no longer about, which is ripping Cardiff open and blowing it apart and doing all of that business. So it's actually quite a magpie mind. I like that. So, it all ties in. It's not it's plot wise. I think it does everything that it needs to do, because it's there actually to hang. That dinner scene is the headline, really. This is all sort of slight window dressing, and which obviously becomes the issue. She can do the sci-fi acting stuff, by the way. She's really good at it, and I think there is a knack to sci-fi acting that I think some of the actors in the more recent years of Doctor Who haven't quite had. I think it's gone a little bit too underwhelming, actually. Not what she's doing here, which is believable but heightened, dramatic but real. But it gives you the punch. It means you're not watching a show where people are arguing about who shagged who in a pub. This is about ripping the universe open. The lighting here is superb. But I'm afraid, does now lead us to the bit of the story that I have never quite got on with. I think to justify a Doctor Who story that is largely a conversation or two sets of conversations, because we mustn't forget that actually the Mickey Rose stuff, which I wasn't that bothered about at the time, is actually really important for those two characters, and it's they're a good companion piece to the main talk that's going on in the restaurant between the Doctor and Margaret. But there has been nothing. We need Chekhov's Heart of TARDIS, basically. We have had nothing up to this point that has suggested that the TARDIS can do anything like this, which essentially means whatever happens now, if you need a thing to happen, we can do this. And that to me is not, I'm afraid, not great science fiction. And it has so much that's great about it, and you can say, and I think with some justification, but that's not what this episode is about. Yes, I absolutely buy that. And occasionally to allow, I allow the rewriting of the Time Lords to facilitate something as brilliant as the Deadly Assassin. I allow for the nonsense of the idea of Yeti in the underground with web guns targeting the Doctor, for the brilliance of the Web of Fear. But the ship's telepathic and it translates alien language. That's a big leap to, it knows that you're sad and need a chance again and will turn you into a baby. I need more than that, really. There's nothing about a space-time ship. All right, it travels in time, so it could maybe reduce us in age, but maybe we needed something where, I don't know, they were doing something and something malfunctioned, and for a moment we had a 9-year-old Rose or something, and then it got back to normal and said, we refracted the time cones and you travelled within our time travel axis rather than staying in stasis as you normally do when you travel in the TARDIS. Or so it because otherwise it becomes a magic button where, and as somebody alluded to in the comments, when Rose opens the TARDIS in a couple of weeks' time, it does a different thing. It turns her into the Bad Wolf. And again, I think that's, and especially when the source and the heart of your cop-out is the program's vehicle that gets you from A to B, because it suddenly... it doesn't become a facilitator of stories. The TARDIS should really be a facilitator of stories, not a solver of problems, which is, and I think that's been a big issue. It becomes a bigger issue, I think, in the Stephen Moffat era, that it never really was in the classic era, where they realised that the TARDIS is too powerful if you're not careful. So, it gets you there and it gets you away. But if you spend too much other time with it, it can rob it of the drama. But I do love Rose's realization that Mickey deserves better, and that sort of bittersweet ending. There's some real humanity there, and I like the Doctor's reaction to Mickey as well. He goes, "Should we go?" But he doesn't push it. And then it screams Cardiff at the end. It goes, "We're gonna leave the legend that's on the Millennium Centre." Well, I have done Moths Ate My Doctor Who scarf. I did post that, so that was nice to be out there. I don't think I took a photo like an idiot. And here we're going to, the most popular culture-y Doctor Who has ever been. But I've already done this one. The lovely Jenny Shirt chose Bad Wolf and Parting of the Ways. I can't even remember. I certainly chose the controller. Martha Cope. Yes. I love that story. This has brought it all fly back. I remember seeing the Dalek in the trailer. And actually, a friend of mine, I remember, had said that he doesn't watch the the Coming Next, and I remember thinking, oh, should I have not watched the Coming Next because I wouldn't have known about the Daleks? But I'd got the brain thing going on there where I could see the Daleks, but it would still be exciting when I first saw them next time, and it was. You do that kind of cognitive dissonance thing where you hold two distinct memories in your head of one of, well, I know the Daleks are in it, and two of, oh, what a lovely surprise, it's the Daleks. Costume designer Lucinda Wright, she was the costumes on a film I was in since then as well. She was very nice, and she gave me a brilliant costume. Anyway, there we go. That was Boomtown, which I sort of got what I expected from, because I'd never been down on it, and I knew, and it's never going to be the sort of episode I'm gonna love, because I think I prefer a bit more crash bang wallop. But then again, I like episodes that are funny. I think I liked the funnies in it more this time. I thought maybe they were a bit too self-consciously sort of funny and cheap. You know, the dart and the pill, it was all... none of it had any consequence because it was played so lightly. But that's kind of what it was there for. And again, it would have been a bit boring if she had outwitted the Doctor with such simple things there. The Doctor was on his guard for that situation. We knew that. So that was quite clever. But then again, having known that, actually she was distracting him for a plan B. So I actually think it's it's very cleverly... it's clever. Margaret's actions are very cleverly plotted throughout that. And I think the viewer's expectation is continually thwarted. And that is good. And actually, sometimes when the things that you think are going to happen, you think, oh, it's going to be that sort of story, you kind of get a bit deflated because you go, well, I've seen this before, so I know where this is going to go. And every time I think you thought you knew where this story was going to go, it didn't go. And I think that's very much to its credit. And I do like the writing and the playing of those two parallel conversations. I think it's definitely Noel Clarke's best performance in the show to date. Captain Jack gets kind of sidelined after he's had the Scooby Gang bit at the beginning, but it was nice that he got that. And Eccleston's excellent. He's really good in that. I do really like him in the quieter moments, though, and Joe Ahern clearly likes him, and I think he's often at his most effective when he cuts back to him and he's not saying anything, and he's judging absolutely how to pitch the fact that this is dramatic, but he's going to be quietly a sort of quiet piece of ballast to it. It's good. And Annette Badlands, super duper. So, my 5 favourite things that are going to tie in with Steve O'Brien's 5 favourite things, I hope. I mean, fat chance, I suspect. I mean, Steve and I are of a similar age. I think we've got a similar sense of humour, a similar outlook. Yeah, let's see if we're in accord. So, and I'm minded about what Steve said at the beginning, and I think I alluded to it with John Barrowman's W thing, that I don't really know what it is, but as I say, it seemed modern. And the modern series being set in the real world. Often Doctor Who's real world is a sort of picture book type, and I quite like that. I love the fairy tale villagey vibe that a lot of Stephen Moffat's stuff has. I like a village green with a red phone box and all of that. But I do also like, the Autons on the high street, and as we've said, the Yeti on the loo in Tooting Bec. But of course, when I've watched a lot of that in Doctor Who, it's been in the past. It's been in a 70s London street, and because I was very conscious when Doctor Who came back that it needed to win over a modern audience, when it was doing things that seemed to be doing that, I felt very optimistic. I was like, this speaks to the audience that it needs to get. It's going to have me anyway, because I love aliens charging about eating people or whatever. But you need a sort of in for an audience for whom that might be quite rich. You need something to dilute it with that's more easy to digest, and modern day Cardiff, and that sort of way of shooting the urban scenes, and the eye that Joe Ahern does, and particularly the ear that Russell T Davies has. I mean, that sort of stuff you say it's to damn him really to say he can write it in his sleep, because I'm sure it's not that easy, but he makes it look easy. And the best stand-ups do that. The best stand-ups, the ones where you go, you just seem to have just sort of tossed this out there. Now, of course, the art is to make it look easy, to not show you're working. And I think sometimes Doctor Who writing can be at sort of pains to show how clever it is, and the genre lends itself to that. Meticulous plotting and clever references and amazing volte-faces or switcheroos or whatever. But actually, the accessibility, the humanity, the reality is the stuff that Russell T Davies, I think, at his peak and at his best, there's no one to touch him really, and that was the key to getting people watching Doctor Who again. Really, I think that was the gateway drug, to then get people have a line of Daleks up their nose. So, and Steve alluded to that in his opening, and I think it was a powerful observation. But so has he given me an insight there into his 5 favourite things? What are my 5 favourite things? Well, I mean, I think I have to, and I sometimes resist going for the director. And when I do go for the director, I think it's sometimes, this is obvious. They've done some great battle set pieces and some amazing visuals and some brilliant pacing. But often that's when they have material to do it with. Michael Ferguson in Ambassadors of Death, Joe Ahern in the following 2 episodes, where you can really see the director at work. I think here what he does is far more subtle, and that's much harder. But that opening shot where William Thomas is framed, the creeping tension, the way that he films the Slitheen, the way that he films the actors inside the TARDIS, I think he's the raw material he has fewer opportunities to show directorial flourishes. And obviously I'm not saying show as in demonstrate, because too self-conscious direction can be distracting and annoying, and you don't want the director going, it's me. It needs to be unobtrusive and unnoticeable. And the fact is, I kind of had not noticed it in the first 20 years of my knowledge of Boomtown, but watching it this time around, I think you can really see where his work is subtly brilliant, driving this episode and keeping us interested, even though he hasn't got the same weapons in his arsenal that that other scripts afford the directors. So I think Joe Ahern, and I think especially the way that he shoots those TARDIS scenes, and I think just the way that he shoots and paces the whole episode. I think Mickey deciding, and it's just to go. And sometimes you do have to, don't you? You just have to decide to go. And I think, it feels like, I think if you could be distracted into just thinking, oh, this is, these two are having an argument. It's not, that's not really the main meat of the story. It's just to take us away from what's going on with the Doctor and Margaret. But actually, it's a bit like the musical episode of Buffy. Yeah, it is a musical, but actually within that, loads of really important character things happen that are seismic, and I think that's it. And I think to have changed Mickey from what he was, which was sort of annoying boyfriend character, to somebody with agency that we actually feel sympathy for, is a credit to both the actor and to the writing and to the mature way that the show decides to deal even-handedly with its characters and show the consequences of the fun and hijinks, because there is an essential contradiction at the core of Doctor Who, especially modern Doctor Who, where they go, oh, it's so fun travelling in the TARDIS and going somewhere where every week somebody is brutally killed and, threats of violence occur and there's danger. And of course, people do get off on danger. We know that human beings are adrenaline junkies. It's part of our survival mechanism, is that danger sends endorphins around us, which make us alert to it and therefore make us hopefully escape from it. But those endorphins then give us a high that you can't replicate elsewhere. And I think that this episode sort of explores that idea of the contradiction between what is safe and normal, and whether we look down on that, and whether actually the Doctor and Rose's quest for, their moral questing, if you like, because they're the goodies and on the signs of the angels, actually is also a sign of something slightly more dubious underneath. I think that's all. And again, I don't think it's providing any answers, but I think it's very sagely saying this is, these are the contradictions at the heart of all of us. Which is much more interesting than going, these are the good guys, these are the bad guys, this is what you should think, and this is what's right, and this is what's wrong. I don't think that says any of these things in here, but that the Doctor is a big enough character to take the burden on. And I think that's my third favourite thing is this, the examination of capital punishment and of the Doctor's role within it, because sometimes I think that's quite uncomfortable for us, and we do make our decision, and we make our peace with our decision about how we view the character. And I know to some right-wing friends, yes, I've got right-wing friends, I know some people in this day and age might find that impossible, that I, a liberal person, might actually be friends with people who have different views from me. Try it. It's a wonderful thing, because it means you examine your own conscience and your own ideas as well. And they see the Doctor as every inch the person who's like, this is right, this is wrong, and I don't mind wiping things out that are against what is right and proper and correct. And I'm aware that my worldview of the Doctor as a sort of mimsy, hand-wringing liberal is not consistent with everything that the Doctor does all the time. And again, I think that's interesting, rather than a binary, this is right, this is wrong, and you misunderstand the show and all of that business. Because, and at the end of the day, the show is not a definitive text, and it's also should never be one of truly lofty ideals, because it should be a show about farting green aliens, killing people, and charging about Cardiff and being silly, because that's the main thing. The fact that it can then do this other stuff as well is a wonderful secondary element to it, but it's not a pious program that is handing you a leaflet on how you should think and behave. It will occasionally throw up, treatises on the various moral aspects. But I don't, I think if it was Boomtown every week, it would not be the show I know and love. But the fact that you can do a Boomtown every now and again, sandwiched between stories about, gas mask wearing children in World War II and the Daleks invading futuristic game shows, is part of the beauty of the show. But we must never lose sight of the fact that it has to be entertaining and fun, which brings us to number 4. And I like the guy. I like Alit Pedrick. What's his character called? Idris. Because I like the fact he says Doctor Who. And I like the fact that she's just jumped out the window, and he goes, yes, she has. It's a beautiful... I shouldn't think he's got more than 6 lines. I think he's lovely. I love the fact that he, Doctor Who magazine made us think he was going to be doing loads in it. I still think it's a part that's worth turning up for, and I think he has a nice lightness of touch with it, and it's just a little bit of levity in the episode, which again lulls us into thinking that this story might be a sort of romp and a runaround. This story keeps deflecting us as to what it actually is, and I think maybe that's my number 5, is that this story keeps changing your expectations. You think you've got a handle on it, and then it takes you somewhere else. And I think it does ultimately paint itself into a corner, which is a shame. But I think the journey is very interesting, because at every 5 minutes I thought, oh, it's going to be this kind of story now. And then it never quite turned out to be that, and it turned out to be something quite different and quite original. And I definitely look forward to the next time I watch it, where I don't have to talk all the way through it, because I think, on the evidence of how I've watched it just now, it will be an extremely enriching experience, because I'm not going into it as, oh, this was the slightly dull but worthy one in between those 2 episodes. No, this isn't dull. It's interesting on its own terms, but it's trying to do something else. And it's not actually trying, it's succeeding. It's telling something that is subtle, that has character dynamics, that is thoughtful, that is actually quite sad, but that still has the requisite, it's got It's got bloody earthquake in Cardiff. It's got the rift being torn open. It's got the threat of a nuclear explosion, and it's got some arch villainy. We yes, there is that fun stuff in the restaurant, and there is, the fact that she makes them question themselves about which one of you is going to look me in the eye. I love that bit as well. There's so many bits, aren't there? I might have to go back and. Who's going to look me in the eye is amazing, isn't it? That's really superb. And again, the way that Joe Ahern shoots that. But she also then gets to stand on a surfboard with one lizard arm with her hand around Rose's throat and talk about riding the crest of the inferno in a brilliant, exciting sci-fi, the SHIT is going to hit the fans sort of way. So, great. I really enjoyed that. Again, it's never going to be my favourite episode because it's not my favourite type of episode. I think I'm probably a bit more boring and trad than that, and yet I love Love and Monsters, so maybe I'm not. I don't know. Gosh, my views are contradictory, and my tastes don't always follow a predictable pattern. That doesn't make me special. We are all like that. That is the whole point of this and Doctor Who and all the stuff I've been saying hitherto. But for some reason, no, this will never be my favourite episode, because I think I expect other things from my sort of go-to Doctor Who. But I love the fact that it exists, and I certainly know that next time I watch it, I think I will find it very rich and very rewarding, and I'm very, very pleased that it exists. And I think it just goes to show how deftly this first season was constructed, and how quick and right off the bat they were in examining the different kinds of story the Doctor Who could tell. And also this does the classic Doctor Who thing of being a story told under constraints. It's clearly the sort of low budget one of the season. I think I could be wrong there, but I think it seems to be. And it's using the elements it's got, the actors who it trusts, the writer, writing people talking to each other largely, and standing sets, the place that the production is based, and it produces something really interesting and quite unlike anything the show's done before, which is also not to be sniffed at. So, what are my things? Oh, do I really choose the funny secretary man over and above? Can you look me in the eye? What is that? It's the Joe Ahern's direction, which is very good, and it takes in all sorts of different bits, because I love the Scooby Gang bit where they all line up and the music that accompanies that. I love the whole feel of that of a gang. I love anything that's got. I liked Department Q quite recently. Anything that's got a sort of misfit gang solving trouble, is absolutely my cup of tea. I could watch 100 dramas like that, and that has that real vibe of that. So Joe Ahern, yeah. Then what did I say? I said, the fact that the sort of what they do with the Mickey and Rose relationship, including Mickey just going and Rose acknowledging that he deserves better, which is an elevation of that character who'd been comic relief and I think slightly tonally misjudged early on. And the remedial work they do to that, I think, shows a smart eye and a smart ear, and some perceptive self-adjustment in terms of what the series is doing with that important character. The Doctor and Margaret, the capital punishment, and I'll take into that who's going to look me in the eye. I think the idea that it takes you to the story after the villain has been defeated, if you like. It says, yeah, but what happens now? Because we forget about that. When Doctor Who leaves an adventure, we can sort of go, well, we don't really need to worry about what's happened now. But we do, because the people that we leave have to live their lives, or, in this case, get executed. And how much impact has what our heroes done had on that, and how much impact does that have on our heroes, who then go, oh, I'm larking around in time and space, which can make them seem culpable at best, glib at worst. Screw it. I like guest actors, and I like what he does, and I like heroics in small roles. Wonder why. And what was and I think, my fifth thing was the way that the story continually shifts from what you expect it's going to be, in a way that means that the audience never too ahead of the game, and when it thinks it is, I think those expectations are subverted, and we're distracted in the way that the Doctor is by Margaret's antics. We're distracted from the bigger picture, whilst actually considering the bigger picture. The distraction from the bigger picture of the plot is actually looking at the bigger picture of the morality in that conversation that the Doctor and Margaret have. So one bigger picture is distracting you from the other. It's extraordinarily clever. And I guess, it's not the big pitched battles and, monsters in corridors. Although, that it's very creepy when, there's a monster. There is a monster early on that you think is going to kill a journalist, and that takes you somewhere else as well. It's very Russell, that, as I say, that scene. But that takes you into places that I think are novel and interesting for Doctor Who. And I also think something else I like about it is the fact that I think particularly the nuance in it is a lesson to viewers and commentators on Doctor Who today. I hadn't expected that it's actually all about moral grey areas that we have to live in, because otherwise we just want everybody to be like us, and we condemn everybody that isn't. And that's not what liberal, kind people do. That's what dictators do. And I'm very interested in that in the modern day and age, especially as Doctor Who fandom and commentary seems to be awash with it. So it's more relevant to the show that housed it than I think any of us could have guessed at the time. So it's aged very well. Well, I don't think Steve will have chosen half of those things, but it'll be entertaining whatever he's chosen.
Okay, so my favourite bits. Well, I'm going to say that my first one is the moment when this new TARDIS team scale the steps of Cardiff, what I presume is Cardiff Town Hall. This definitely seems to me like Russell and Joe Ahern want us to think of the Doctor, Jack, Rose and Mickey as like the Scooby Gang and Buffy. Joss Whedon was always very good, right up to the Avengers, of like framing a shot with his cast. And this is definite feeling of that they're a proper team now. I kind of wish we'd have had a few more stories with this dynamic, doing the ensemble thing like Chris Chibnall later did. But, oh well. So yes, that's my favourite first bit.
Yes, well, I would have chosen. I mean, I sort of threw that into the Joe Ahern encapsulating everything, but I was certainly mindful of that bit. But I was trying to have a bit of everything there, and so I don't think I can get the point, because I also included lots of other bits that Joe Ahern did, and Steve rightly sort of credits Russell with that as well, and the Buffy parallel I think is an important aspect of it too. And I very much love that bit. It really felt like the show meant business in a way that a few modern genre programs that I'd grudgingly come to realise were doing the sort of stuff that was taking the place of Doctor Who when Doctor Who wasn't on the telly, and that Doctor Who was going to have to tap into a little bit without hopefully aping completely. And yes, the fact that it's reminiscent of Buffy, but it's not totally Buffy, I'm very happy with, because I love Buffy, and I was very happy to see that. And it's the sort of scene that makes you sit up and feel like you're a part of it, and everything about it, from the scoring to the framing and just its positioning in the episode is funky and fun and enjoyable and buoyant. So yeah, but I won't get a point for it.
My second has to be the scene in the restaurant between the Doctor and Margaret Blaine. I'm not even going to try to pronounce her Slovene name. There are obviously some brilliant jokes in there, like the way that the Doctor keeps foiling her plans to kill him, but the dialogue between them is just so powerful and poignant. And, it's just Russell at his best. And I also love the idea of the Doctor guzzling down a steak and chips. We don't actually get to see him do that. And actually, we don't get to see enough of the Doctor eating in Doctor Who generally. But again, it's that clash of the extraordinary and the ordinary that's at the heart of Who, I think. And that, in a nutshell, is why I love Boomtown.
Now then, this is of great interest to me. This scene, one, it's obviously the showpiece part of the whole episode, and it's really the reason the episode exists. It seems to me is to have the Doctor, have a sort of post-defeat dinner with the baddie and look at the ramifications of what he does and the moral contradictions of what he does and the moral contradictions of what villainy does. And I think that's really compelling drama that makes you examine moral grey areas, but at the same time with this sort of comedy of assassination manners, if you like, that only Doctor Who can do whilst discussing the ramifications of mass murder and capital punishment and all sorts of other things that the show deals with. So I think that's very deftly handled. But Steve also mentions there the steak and chips, which was something that bothered me at the time. I was much more comfortable because I am a vegetarian, but not a vegan. Well, I'm starting to, we've actually been going along those lines some time this year, but we're still flexible if we're at other people's houses or this, that, and the other. You don't want to be a pain in the ass. So, you make your own moral compromise. Now, I don't mention it in any way, but because I think I'm virtuous. I'm a country boy. I live around farms. I think people eating meat is necessary to sustain a whole sort of way of life that goes back centuries in this country and is part of the lifeblood of England. I'm just in a privileged position in the liberal, comfortable Western world that I can make that decision not to partake in animals who've been, farmed and treated in a way that I find uncomfortable. And again, I don't like the idea of eating something that's died. It's not an aesthetic issue. I like all food. I'm a bit of a gourmand. So it's definitely a choice based on idealism rather than taste, texture, whatever. But I don't judge anybody that does. I don't think I'm better than anybody. As I say, I'm aware it's very much something I can choose to do. But I'm also aware it's a compromise. And actually for years, because my mum made me to start off with, I had to keep eating fish because I have very high cholesterol. We've got to have a family history of heart disease. So my mum said, well, I don't mind not cooking meat for you, but I'm not doing fish either. And I was under her roof. And so you make that compromise. And so I carried on doing that for a while, but I've gradually taken that out of my diet as well. But even when I was doing that, I knew that was a moral compromise. And partially, yes, I have high cholesterol and all of that, but I also really like fish. So it was a moral compromise I was prepared to take that just also so happened to tie in with my tastes and desires. But as I've got older, I've become more and more uncomfortable with that and discovered that I can live without something that I like very, very much. If I work really hard, I can also get what I needed from fish in my diet to keep my cholesterol lower. Oh, I'm also on statins now as well. Anyway, why do I talk? So the vegetarian thing, I only mentioned because of, the two doctors and all of that. And I remember thinking at the time, oh yes, Doctor Who's a vegetarian like what I am. Ha, 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 ha. But I'm also aware that it's like what Boomtown has talked about. It is a moral position fraught with compromises and hypocrisies. I mean, even vegan food is produced with the destruction of creatures as sidelines or byproducts or whatever. And I would never have a go at a vegan and say, yeah, but your thing, does this or does that and has economic and environmental ramifications that perhaps we might not be as comfortable with if we looked at them as hard as we might. So long as that vegan person isn't saying to me, oh, you've got leather shoes on or whatever, sanctimony is not a good look from a vegetarian, a pescatarian, a vegan, or even a meat eater. I think you kind of have to let people do what they want. And by example or by interesting conversation or exchange of views, you might change people's mind, but nobody's mind was ever changed by sanctimony. And indeed, when I left my satchel, my leather satchel, on the train the other day with my laptop in it, and I put on Twitter, oh no, if anyone sees a leather satchel with a laptop in it on the Vauxhall train, most people were lovely and said, oh, I hope you get it back, and oh, try this, and have you thought of this? And one person put, leather satchel, you got what you deserved. And you think, right, and you think you're a nice person because when somebody is freaking out that they've lost something that's got loads of their work on it and obviously is expensive and they're remonstrating with themselves because it was their own fault because they left it, and what a shitty day I'm having, and blah, 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 blah. And you think the best thing to do there is tell me off because my old satchel that I've had loads and loads of use out of, so it's a very good use of the product, which is a byproduct anyway. You think, well, that you're really going to change ways. That's going to be my Damascene conversion. Some stranger being a sanctimonious prick on the internet. So I've slightly got off tangent there, but the point is, I was quite surprised that Doctor Who was steak and chips. And there's no reason that the Doctor should be vegetarian. And in fact, I'm sure there's loads of evidence of him so not being. I know Patrick Troughton once wrote in a letter to a fan, didn't he, that he thought Jesus should have been a vegetarian, but that Troughton himself wasn't, interesting enough. But he was musing. I think he was going through a theological phase, and I think that's interesting that you think somebody of high moral value like Jesus should do a thing even though you don't do it yourself, which is sort of holding your hands up and admitting again your own culpability and your own moral compromises, which is what I think intelligent, decent people do. So the Doctor, steak and chips, very interesting, and also a bit prosaic for the Doctor as well, because, you know, we think of our Doctor as a Victorian dandy or whatever, and yes, we know that Eccleston is the leather-jacketed northerner, but I remember thinking, steak and chips, does that fit with the Doctor for me? And I actually put that to Russell when I interviewed him, and he had a really interesting take on it. He was saying he didn't want the Doctor to be all, you know, mung beans and alfalfa salad or whatever, because that would have alienated the audience. That would have made him seem to be part of the sort of liberal metropolitan elite that people think that sort of media types are, or that flowery liberals are, or whatever, and that the Doctor needs to be antithetical to some of that. Otherwise, he's just a kind of walking sort of Guardian reader, and nobody wants that. So he wanted to make the Doctor, you know, somebody who liked simple, straightforward, decent food, and I think that is a perfectly legitimate take on the character, even though it doesn't quite fit in with my comfortable worldview that sort of nice, thoughtful, peaceful people actually consider the animals. But there's also a perfectly pragmatic reason to go, no, there's a reason, you know, Homo sapiens and Time Lord sapiens, you know, have the wherewithal to dominate other living creatures, and so long as they treat them humanely, it is all part of this very clever natural biocycle that we have on this planet that sustains it, and that literally different aspects of it feed off each other in order to survive and to propagate and keep the biosphere running efficiently. It's a finely tuned engine based on various things pushing and pulling and consuming you know, one and the other, and so there's no reason that the Doctor shouldn't, and that very straightforward take was a way of again bringing the character into the everyday, and not to be, yes, to be alien in some senses, but not aloofly so, not this sort of lofty being who's a bit fancy pants with his food, for example, because that might be a barrier for some. And I think that's an interesting choice, and that gave me a lot of food for thought. And it's a subject I return to quite often, and I like that part of the interview. I like that I'd asked Russell that question and that he gave me a really, really interesting answer. I wish I'd answered more questions along those lines, because I think that was a good one. I think a lot of my other ones were what's it like in space? Anyway, so there's a bit. I'll pat myself on the back for asking Russell that question. I'm glad Steve raised it, because I was talking through it. I've talked quite a lot of this. This is an episode. There's quite a lot to talk about this episode, this talky episode. Let's see if Steve has a number 3.
Okay. Favourite bit number 3 is a bit of a curveball. It's the casting of William Thomas. Because I think I'm right in saying, I mean, you'll definitely know this better than me, that he was the first original series guest star to be cast in the rebooted series. So while it's not a bit of in-universe continuity, to me it's this sort of lovely link-up between the OG show and the new one. Though, like in Remembrance of the Daleks, he's quite wasted here. It's bizarre how sort of Doctor Who can take one of the Wales' top character actors and barely use him twice. So there you go, Toby. It's William Thomas.
Oh, that one's right up my street. I mean, I did mention all of those things that you said, but I didn't choose it as one of my favourite things. And I think on another day I might have done. And I think maybe if he'd appeared later in the episode, I think by the time I got to the end, I got so many other things to talk about. But yes, it's definitely a thing. And I remember reading in Doctor Who magazine when I read that William Thomas was amongst the cast, I was thrilled that we had a link to the past, because even though I was excited that Doctor Who was now a brave new world and all of those things, there is something, isn't there, about looking back. It's a show about time travel. I think it's acceptable to be nostalgic about it. I think it's acceptable to look back. I think maybe we should be wary of living in the past. And I actually think who's going to try and be quite wise now. There's something about letting the past go. I don't. I fixate on past slights and resentments and fears and go over and over things I've done that I regret. I'm doing it today. I did a couple of things today that niggled me about the way I did something, and it was just incompetence on my part, but I worried it reflected badly on me in front of important people. And so now when I think of the thing, it will all forever be tainted by that nagging doubt. So the past can come. We mustn't let the past live. We must let it go. But there is, curiously, a weird comfort because we know we survived the past. And also because we tend to idolize the past for some reason, because it's not as scary as the present, I guess, because the present has uncertainty. We know how the past ends. But also it's nice to be reminded that Doctor Who is this ongoing thing, and we're connected with the people in it. So when we reconnect, even if it's a guy who was just in one episode, however many years ago, it's nice, and it's nice that he becomes a piece of... He's more than an actor now. He's an actor with a piece of trivia attached, and I rather like that, in the way that even the most sort of humble episode can be the only episode in which this happens or something. And there's all these little things that just allow things to have their own little way of shining in the darkness in all sorts of different ways that Doctor Who does when it sparkles with all of this sort of trivia. It has its own particular glint, and this one is a character actor flavoured one, and so that is especially up my street, even though I didn't choose it. But well done for you doing so, Steve.
For number 4, it's just the sheer Cardiffness of the episode. Before we got spoiled by Torchwood, it was just really thrilling to see so much of Cardiff on screen. I mean, I was always a fan of when Doctor Who filmed on proper streets and really explored a town or city, which actually it didn't do enough of in the old show. But this really gets into the corners of Cardiff. It's like Doctor Who properly embracing the real world. And that was just so exciting at the time, because there'd been such a dearth of British sci-fi on TV. That just to see aliens and spaceships and the general science fiction-ness on proper Welsh or British streets, it just felt so different and exciting.
Yes, I think that's a good shout, and I did mention Cardiff in the commentary. I think I think Steve hits upon an important point there, that it's part of the identity of the show. Backstage as well as front stage, I don't think the show should ever be ashamed of its Cardiff roots, if you like, because Doctor Who means an awful lot to the community that is made in any television programme that uses local talent and local facilities, and it can bring interest and revenue into a town or a city or wherever it's being done. And, I know how Corrie is embraced particularly by Mancunians, for example. And, Doctor Who was so London-centric for most of its life, and it's nice, spotting bits of Denham and various places within not too far a drive from TV centres, so that they're not having to pay hotel bills, and that's all rather part of the fun. And equally, it's nice spotting Cardiff, and I had the pleasure of visiting Cardiff not that long ago and going to stay with my friend Ed Stradling, and he very kindly gave me a bit of a guided tour. I mean, Ed, being Ed, who's no great fan of the new series, just went, yeah, I think they did a Cyberman episode over there, pointing out the window. Can't remember which one. That's actually the wrong Welsh accent to give Ed, but I'm not trying again. That was he's anyway. Let's not get into that. But I enjoyed being in Cardiff, and I enjoyed seeing sort of bits of Doctor Who, and I think it's right that Doctor Who will occasionally reflect the place that the production is based, and I think that's right and good and proper, and it shows off the city brilliantly in the episode. Yeah, lovely, good choice. I didn't choose it. Geography is not really a strong point of mine, so I don't think I'm ever going to be good at choosing the geographical things. But I think Steve makes an excellent point there. That's one that's worth noting.
Finally, Annette Badland. She's just brilliant here. A really great old-fashioned, hissable Doctor Who villain. She just knows exactly how to pitch her performance, and it's one that actually works as much in this episode as it would have done in the classic series. And Margaret Blaine just seems like the sort of character Russell could have done more with. One that could have been sort of bobbing and weaving out of the show for a few seasons. But maybe it's not too late. Maybe the show could revisit the character, but this sort of new version of her. Either that, or I've just given Big Finish an idea for a new spin-off range.
I like the sound of that. It feels to me, I agree, and I mean, Annette Badland is a shoo-in, really, and I wonder if I didn't, because I didn't want to be too obvious and predictable, but that's a shame because it means I'm not giving proper acknowledgement. Get over yourself, Toby. This isn't an official tally. It's not like it's going to be embossed somewhere. It's like officially sanctioned by the choices Toby made in Happy Times and Places. So it's no skin off anybody's nose. But I mean, going into this, I think she was obviously the number one choice, and for some reason, I think I therefore got a little bit waylaid trying to think of other things as well, and then quite never circled back to her, because she's obviously brilliant, and actually probably the standout thing of the episode. It's her episode. She owns it, and she judges it all very, very well. She goes from being comedy villain to very serious villain to morally challenging character of agency to being the twisteroo arch villain. And I think Steve's right, it's a performance that sits equally at home in classic or new Who, and that's my favourite kind of performance. I think she's absolutely terrific, and of course she's sort of actively embraced Doctor Who and fandom and conventions and all that other stuff, and we're very grateful to her for so doing. She's terrific, and she's a really, really good actress, which is why she is never, ever out of work. Well, there we go. That's it. I actually enjoyed that. There was a lot to talk about there, and thanks to Steve for taking part. I'm a great admirer of Steve. If you've never read his stuff, seek it out. He's one of the most knowledgeable and insightful writers about the sort of thing that we all like about, but he's also very witty too. I like him a lot. He's a good man. So check out his stuff and support all of his endeavours, as he's been very supportive of this, as indeed have you. So thanks for this. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, because my budget doesn't stretch to having dinner and bondage with every single one of you out there. But I hope this is the next best thing. And I'll speak to you next time. We all convene in a happy time and place, even if it's a town that goes boom. Thanks very much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke, and my special guest, Steve O'Brien, who you can find all over the internet writing and being clever. I'm grateful to Steve and to the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Darren Howard, Neil Humphreys, Tom Hunter-Watts, Steve Herr, Ed Jefferson, Robert Jewell, Judith Jackson, Mel Jones, Wim Keith, Peter Kelly, James Kersey, Matthew Kilburn, Colin Kilpatrick, Simon King, Paul Kirkley, Andy Kitching, Chris Wright, Hendrik Korzeniowski, Pete Lack, Guy Lambert, Pete Lambert, Andy Larson, Eric Alia, William Lee, Jonathan Latargat, Paul Lindblad, Neil Little, Mark Leadsom, Andrew Lester, Andrew Llewellyn, Jacob Lumley, Nate Lynch, Simon Liss, Man in a Skirt Alert, Damien McGee, Philip Marsh, Joe McLachlan, Glenn McLeod, Garth Maker, Steve Manfred, Nick Mellish, and James Miller. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. Why don't you join my Patreon? It's at patreon.com/Toby Hadoke. It's lovely there, and there's lots of things, including some behind-the-scenes footage from all the DVD and Blu-ray extras that I do, interviews from my archive. Most importantly, though, you get advance releases of these podcasts. They come out several months in advance. You get your own exclusive AMAs and your own exclusive podcast too, and all sorts of other bits and bobs, lots of bonuses, lots of access, and your chance to comment and contribute too. It starts for as little as £3 a month, and for that you do get quite a lot of content. Whether you want it all is another thing, but it's there, and it's like an all-you-can-eat buffet. It's probably slightly overcooked and it's been hanging around for days, but it'll fill you up. And that's, yes, £3 a month, and everything is available from the lowest tier. You can also donate at ko-fi.com/Toby Hadoke on a sort of one-off every now and again basis if you don't want to be tied in to a monthly thing. And if you don't want to do either of those things, you can support these podcasts by giving them a rating, liking, subscribing, 5 stars, and any lines of positive feedback you can give on any of the internet platforms for podcasts and things. Please do so, because it really does help. And why don't you have a look at where I infest the social media? I mean, almost every pore. Instagram, Toby.Hadoke, Blue Sky, Toby Hadoke, B Sky, all of that business, you'll find me. Twitter, twice, at Toby Hadoke, at Hadoke Podcasts. I've got a Facebook page, I've got a website, and I've got a YouTube channel. I'd love it if you could like and subscribe to that. So there we are. That's the end of Boomtown, and it's quite long. So I think I've done enough. But I did like listening to. I did like it when Russell answered that steak and chips question. He did say alfalfa. I'm sure he did, or mung bean, or maybe a bit of both. So maybe go and check that out on that Big Finish interview I've done with him. People occasionally dip back into that and drop me a line to say how much they enjoyed it, and I constantly pinch myself that I've got 5 hours of me chatting to that very fascinating and insightful man. And maybe I just need to pluck up the courage to ask him to do it again, to go over the stories he hadn't covered because he hadn't written and produced them yet. But let's see what happens. That there's another few tales that hang thereby. But anyway, I'm speaking to you when nobody quite knows what's happening in Doctor Who's future. So, well, maybe a chat over steak and chips would be in order, but I wouldn't. Do you know what? If I ever had steak and chips, I haven't eaten meat since I was 11. I don't think my mum was feeding me steak. She might have given me bits of meat and said it was steak, but I don't think we ever had. We didn't have much money. I don't think we ever had. Might have had a braising steak, I suppose. But that's not the same as a steak, is it? It's quite expensive now in the supermarket, isn't it? But look, that's what I'm talking about. Meat now, something about which I know very little indeed. But anyway, yum yum. I'm going to stop because I think this is just filler. A bit like what I consider Boomtown to be for many years. This is just filler, but actually, filler can have lots of morsels of good things, although this actually hasn't. So this bit is the exception that proves the rule.